It started in the crowded apartments of old New York. Simple recipes born from the need to survive. But in just a few decades, everything changed. The traditions of the old world met the abundance of the American dream. From street food sold in barrels to a feast on the family table. This isn't just food, it's a story of who we are. Here are the 25 dishes that defined the golden age of Jewish food. Challah. For centuries, this braided bread was the sacred centerpiece of the Sabbath. But when it crossed the ocean to America, it evolved. Leaving behind the scarcity of the old world, Jewish bakers found themselves in a land overflowing with cheap wheat and sugar. The loaves grew larger, softer, and richer, glistening with egg wash under the lights of crowded city apartments. It transformed from a simple necessity into a symbol of newfound prosperity. Breaking a piece of this golden, sweet bread became the ultimate comfort, a tangible reminder that while traditions remained, life had become sweeter in the land of opportunity. Bagel. Before it was a breakfast icon, it was a street hustle. In 1910, these weren't the soft pillows we know today. They were sold on wooden dowels by shivering peddlers on Hester Street. Dense, chewy, and tough enough to last a week. But the magic happened behind the scenes in the sweaty basement bakeries. The alchemy of boiling malted dough in New York City water created a crust that cracked like glass and a center that pulled like taffy. Then came the great American merger. The bagel met the abundance of the New World, the salty silk of Nova Scotia salmon, and the cool, rich spread of cream cheese. In that union, the bagel stopped being just immigrant sustenance. It became the undisputed flavor of New York itself. Biali, the bagel's quieter, wiser cousin. It didn't ask for fame, and it never got boiling water or a shiny coat. Born in Bialystok, Poland, it was baked simply, just flour, water, yeast, and salt. No hole in the middle, just a depression, a little crater filled with the savory treasures of the old world, roasted onions and poppy seeds. In New York, the Biali became the secret handshake of true locals. It wasn't for the tourists. It was chewy, dusty with flour, and smelled of wood smoke and memory. While the bagel went Hollywood with cream cheese and lox, the Biali stayed true to its roots, a warm, onion-scented reminder of a world that vanished, kept alive in the ovens of the Lower East Side. Rye bread. The backbone of the deli counter. In a world of fluffy white slices, this was the rebel, dark, dense, and unapologetic. It carried the scent of caraway seeds like a perfume from the old country. A good Jewish rye wasn't just baked, it was forged. It had a crust thick enough to bruise your knuckles and a sour tang that fought back. This was the only bread strong enough to hold a mountain of hot pastrami without collapsing. It didn't need butter, it didn't need to be toasted. It just needed to be sliced thick and served with mustard. A loaf of rye on the table meant you weren't just eating, you were surviving, and you were doing it with style. Gefilte fish. It is the edible soul of the Jewish people, a dish born from the poverty of the shtetl, where a mother's love had to stretch one fish to feed a family of 10. When the Jews arrived in America, they left many things behind, but they carried this recipe in their hearts like a sacred scroll. In the crowded tenements of the Lower East Side, live carp swam in family bathtubs on Fridays, a vivid, splashing reminder of who we were. In America, the style evolved, but the essence remained unchanged, a humble gray dumpling that defied the culinary rules of the New World. To the American neighbors, it was a mystery. To us, it was the taste of survival. Served cold, topped with the fire of horseradish, It was the enduring proof of unshakable Jewish identity. Chrain, the crimson fire on the Jewish table. In the frozen fields of the old country, digging this gnarly root from the earth was a battle. But in the kitchens of Brooklyn, it became the great awakener. You didn't just eat chrain, you survived it. Grated by hand until the eyes wept, then stained with the blood-red juice of beets. It was the only force powerful enough to bring a piece of cold fish to life. For the American Jew settling into a life of comfort and soft white bread, that sharp sinus-clearing burn was a necessary jolt, a tear-inducing reminder that while life in America was sweet, our history was sharp, strong, and impossible to ignore. Chopped liver. They called it Jewish foie gras, but it didn't need a fancy French name to rule the appetizer plate. It started with the humblest ingredients: chicken livers, hard-boiled eggs, and onions. But the magic was in the Schmaltz, rendered chicken fat, liquid gold that turned dry ingredients into a velvet spread. In the delis of Midtown, it was served in perfect scoops, a rich, savory monument to excess. It wasn't pretty. It was brown, heavy, and unapologetic. But one bite on a piece of crispy rye bread, and you understood. This wasn't just liver. It was the taste of making something out of nothing, and making it delicious. Pickled herring. Before sushi conquered America, there was herring. For the Jews of Eastern Europe, this silver fish was a currency of survival. Salted in wooden barrels to last through the long winters, it was the taste of the sea in a landlocked life. When they arrived in New York, the barrels came too. On the Lower East Side, the herring mavens stood guard over vats of fish, swimming in cream or wine sauce. It was a polarizing flavor, fishy, briny, and sharp. But for a generation of immigrants working in sweatshops, a piece of pickled herring on a cracker wasn't just a snack. It was a savory connection to the Baltic Sea, preserved in a jar, right there in the heart of Manhattan. Pickles, the crunch heard around the world. On Essex Street, the pickle was king. These weren't the vinegar-soaked imposters you find in supermarkets today. These were fermented, alive, and full of attitude. They floated in giant wooden barrels like green submarines, a brine bath of salt, garlic, dill, and secrets. You had a choice: new pickles, bright green and half sour, crisp like the American morning, or old pickles, dark, soft, and fully sour, carrying the deep fermented wisdom of the old world. For a nickel on a stick, you didn't just buy a vegetable, you bought a cure for everything, from a hangover to homesickness. Gribenes, kosher bacon, Jewish popcorn, the guilty pleasure of the shtetl kitchen. It was a byproduct of thrift. You rendered the fat for cooking, but the prize was what was left behind: chicken skin and onions, fried slowly until they turned into golden, crispy curls of pure joy. In an era before potato chips, this was the ultimate snack. Mothers would slap your hand away as you tried to steal them from the pan, still hot enough to burn your fingers. It was fatty, it was unhealthy, and it was absolutely irresistible. The sound of that crunch? That was the sound of happiness. Schmaltz, liquid gold. Long before we knew about cholesterol, this was the heartbeat of the Ashkenazi kitchen. Because the laws of kashrut forbade butter on a meat table, we created our own miracle. We took the humblest scraps, fat and skin, and rendered them down slowly with onions until the kitchen smelled like heaven. It wasn't just a cooking fat, it was an ingredient. It turned simple potatoes into a feast. It made the chopped liver sing. It was heavy, it was rich, and it was the secret flavor of our survival. To taste Schmaltz is to taste the history of a people who knew how to turn hardship into something that shined. Chicken soup. They call it Jewish penicillin, but to us it was just home. In the drafty tenements of the Lower East Side, this wasn't just dinner, it was medicine. A mother could take a scrawny bird and a few carrots and perform a miracle. The broth had to be golden, shimmering with circles of fat that looked like coins we didn't have. And in the center, the matzo ball, the knedel. Whether it was light as a cloud or heavy as a cannonball, it was the anchor of the Sabbath meal. One spoonful, and the cold world outside simply melted away. Matzo balls, the great debate of the Jewish kitchen. Floating in a sea of golden broth, this humble sphere of matzah meal, eggs, and fat caused more arguments than politics. In the tenements of New York, every grandmother had a side. Were you a maker of floaters, light, airy clouds that dissolved on the tongue, or were you a defender of sinkers, dense, heavy cannonballs that sat in your stomach and kept you warm through the freezing American winter? No matter the density, the knedel was the center of our universe, a simple mixture born of Passover necessity that became the heavy, comforting soul of the Ashkenazi table. Kreplach. If matzo balls were the loud stars of the soup, Kreplach were the quiet mystery, triangular pockets of dough filled with seasoned meat or chicken, hiding their treasure from the world. We ate them on days of judgment and days of secrets, when the divine was hidden, just like the filling inside the pasta. Making them was an assembly line of love, rolling the dough until it was paper thin, folding the corners with precision and sealing them tight. They were slippery, savory jewels. A bite of soft dough giving way to rich meat. It was a reminder that sometimes the best things in life are wrapped in a little bit of mystery. Borscht, the Red Sea of the Ashkenazi summer. While the old world knew it hot and meaty, in America it became the chilled king of the Catskills. They didn't call it the Borscht Belt for nothing. This was a soup that announced itself with a color so vibrant it stained your fingers and your memory. Made from sweet beets, sharpened with lemon, and served ice cold in a glass jar. But the real magic happened at the table. A dollop of thick white sour cream swirled into the deep purple broth. Pink clouds forming in a crimson sky. It was sweet, sour, and refreshingly alive. Brisket, the test of patience. In the old country, this was a tough, cheap cut of meat from the cow's chest, but Jewish mothers knew a secret. You can't rush perfection. They would rub it with garlic and paprika, drown it in onions and carrots, and let it braise for hours and hours. The smell would fill the hallways, driving the neighbors crazy. By the time it came out of the oven, that tough muscle had surrendered. It was tender enough to cut with a fork, falling apart in savory ribbons. It was the centerpiece of the holiday table, a delicious reward for waiting. Roast chicken, the perfume of Friday afternoon. You could walk down the hallway of any apartment building in the Bronx, close your eyes, and know exactly what time it was. It was Shabbat. A whole chicken rubbed simply with paprika and garlic, roasting until the skin was crisp as parchment and the meat fell off the bone. It wasn't fancy. It was usually served with potatoes that had soaked up all the drippings. But when that golden bird hit the table, it was a signal. The work week was over, the candles were lit, and for a few hours we lived like kings. Stuffed cabbage, sweet and sour, just like life itself. Known as holishkis in the old country, these rolled bundles were a masterpiece of peasant ingenuity. A humble cabbage leaf, blanched until pliable, wrapped lovingly around a mix of beef and rice. But the secret was the sauce. Tomatoes, lemon, raisins, and brown sugar. A simmering bath that balanced the sharp bite of acid with the deep comfort of sweetness. They say we ate them because they looked like Torah scrolls. Maybe, but mostly we ate them because nothing else tasted quite so much like a grandmother's love. Kishka. Don't ask what it is, just taste it. In the poverty of the shtetl, nothing was wasted, not even the casing. Kishka was a sausage of survival, a cow's intestines stuffed with the cheapest things we had: flour, onions, schmaltz, and spices. It wasn't meat, but it was rich. It was usually buried deep inside the Shabbat stew, the cholent, cooking slowly overnight until the casing melted away and the filling became a soft, savory pudding. To slice a piece of hot kishka was to slice into the very essence of Jewish comfort food: heavy, spicy, and unapologetically fatty. Potato kugel, the heavyweight champion of the Sabbath. In a world of fancy soufflés, the kugel stood its ground, dense, humble, and indestructible. It was a masterpiece of grating. Mountains of potatoes and onions, shredded until knuckles were raw, and bound with eggs and oil. The goal was always the crust, that dark golden ground corner piece that everyone fought over. Inside, it was soft and peppery. Outside, it was armored in crunch. It could sit in a warm oven for 24 hours and only get better. It wasn't light food, it was fuel for the soul. Noodle kugel, or as we called it, Lokshen kugel. This was the sweet rebel of the dinner table. In the old world, pasta was savory, but in Jewish America, we broke the rules. We drowned egg noodles in a rich bath of sour cream, cottage cheese, and sugar. It was a casserole that didn't know if it was dinner or dessert. In the suburbs of the 1950s, it evolved again. We added canned pineapples, maraschino cherries, and topped it with crushed cornflakes. It was a chaotic, sweet, melting pot of a dish, just like the immigrant experience itself. Confusing to the neighbors, but absolutely beloved by us. Tzimmes. To make a big deal out of something. That's what the word means. And that's exactly what this dish was, a celebration of hope in a pot. On Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, we didn't just pray for a sweet year, we ate it. Carrots cut into rounds like gold coins, symbolizing prosperity, stewed slowly with sweet potatoes, prunes, and honey. It was a dish that refused to be savory. In the hard times of the Depression, this bright orange stew was a beacon of optimism on the dinner table, a sticky, sweet promise that no matter how bitter life got, there was always sweetness ahead. Knish, the brick that built the Lower East Side. Before the hot dog, before the pretzel, there was the Knish. Sold from push carts and legendary spots like Yonah Schimmel's, this was street food with weight. A fist-sized square or round of dough stuffed to the breaking point with mashed potatoes, kasha, or spinach. It wasn't light, it wasn't diet food. It was a hot, dense anchor for the working man. A nickel could buy you a Knish that sat in your stomach for hours, keeping you warm against the wind off the East River. It was the edible cobblestone of New York City. Latkes, the sound of the holiday. Long before the gifts, there was the sizzle. On Hanukkah, we celebrated the miracle of the oil by frying everything we could get our hands on. But the king was the latke. Shredded potatoes, squeezed dry until they begged for mercy, then fried in a pool of hot oil until they were golden, lacy, and dangerously crisp. It was a messy, greasy affair that left the whole house smelling of onions for a week. And at the table, the eternal war: applesauce or sour cream, sweet or savory. In the end, it didn't matter, as long as they were hot. Rugelach, the sweet kiss goodbye. No Jewish gathering was complete without a plate of these little crescents. In the Old World, they were yeast dough, but in America, we reinvented them with cream cheese, creating a pastry so tender it shattered at the touch. Rolling them was a ritual, a circle of dough sliced like a pizza, smothered in apricot jam, cinnamon, walnuts, or chocolate, rolled up tight from the wide end to the point. They were bite-sized, which was dangerous, because you could never eat just one. The perfect ending to a golden age.